Hey everybody, this is Perch. You know, recently I did a couple videos. No videos. This has nothing to do with Dan. Around um, comic book. It wasn't exactly culture war topics, but it was certainly touching on them. The idea of first there was a brand new comic company that had some comics that sounded like pretty good ideas. But the entire pitch for the company was this will feature marginalized creators. And they ran with that first. And then they went with the, and here's the story pitch second. Or in many cases, it was buried down in the article. And my comment there, and I think it was, I always question when I do these things and I get responses that seem to indicate nobody actually listened to the video and instead just ran with whatever they thought I was talking about. I always ask myself, did I make the point well? Did I not? Did I explain what was going on? And so you wonder. But I think that one I portrayed fairly well. And basically my comment is a lot of these comics sound good and they're by creators. In this case, the Perch guy is a good creator. But you're basically a choice was made in the marketing to say the right thing to lead with is the marginalized creators bit, not the actual story. And in my mind, I think that's a big mistake because I don't think from a marketing perspective, marginalized creators is actually a selling point like it used to be. At one point that was something new and somewhat novel. I think in 2024, there's been so much of that we have lots of comics by marginalized creators with marginalized characters that neither the creators nor the characters feel marginalized anymore because there's been a heavy emphasis on that. So if you're gonna, the goal of marketing is put your best foot forward to try and separate yourself from the pack to create the hook. And in this case, it felt like the hook was again buried. The hook was not very. It was the real hook were these powerful stories by some talented people, and that was way, way down. And instead, we ran with the thing that I think has the least impact. It's not knocking marginalized creators. And I think some of the people in the comments, as we're going to talk about a little bit, came in and wanted to fight that fight. And it's like you're fighting the wrong channel. And then I did another video talking about Star Wars, and my comment there was, I believe Star Wars, sometime around the prequel trilogy, lost the plot. And it made itself so both convoluted and it started to retcon its own shit. So I know that somebody did a comic and a story about why Darth Vader didn't recognize C-3PO even though he built him as a child. Like, you can write your way around everything, but it just got a little bit absurd. And I think, but the challenge, the beauty of Star Wars in my mind was that it's easy to hop into, and that was it. I said it in the other video. You can say, "Hey, I love Star Wars." And your friend's like, I've never seen Star Wars. It's like, cool, let's go watch them. 6 hours later, you both are up to speed and you're able to kind of have fun and watch Star Wars together or talk about Star Wars and you both be fans. But now it's turned into this super goofy mess of expanded universe stuff and stories and prequels and Disney Plus shows and all this other shit. And it no longer feels like something that is clean and easy to just jump into. And I really believe that's kind of the point. The people got angry at that one too. It's like, oh, so now of course we got LGBTQ representation and now it's confusing. It's like, no, friends. It got confusing roughly 20 years ago. And it lost its easy ingestion pitch. It was just easy to kind of wrap your head around Star Wars and go with it. And I think that's there's not every brand needs to be super dense with lore. Not everything needs to be Tolkien. You could have something very simple, and in Star Wars' case, I think that's part of the charm, is that it was just simple. And the more complicated you made it, the less accessible you made it, and the less accessible you made it, the more people tuned out. And I think that's the problem you have now, is that you got this tangled mess of stuff. That's just my opinion. But that one got people upset too. And I think the thing I want to kind of talk to all you about, and it's just the state we're in with the fandom, is that people are just really of the mind to want to fight anything. And so the arguments are, people are just quick to jump into that argument. So it didn't matter what I said on the video. The second time, I think in the preview thumbnail, it had the Acolyte in there. And therefore, it's like, here you are. I like to show up to videos and talk about, incels complaining about, characters in the Acolyte equals racism. And then the other guy side says, I like to show up to videos that show the Acolyte and talk about how Disney's too woke and fuck Disney. And it feels like both people are showing up and having that argument, not watching the video, not listening to what was being said. The same thing with the press release around the marginalized creators. If the people who came in, and weren't many, the couple of people who came in who were like, this is racism. No, it's the opposite, actually. The goal is to make these, help these comic books sell, right? I think that's the goal. So saying, hey, your marketing approach is losing people on the way in. I'm not saying you hide the fact that you've got a non-male, white, straight creator doing the book. I'm saying, well, I'll put it to you this way. Vita's comic in that pitch was a reverse Indiana Jones, somebody who steals from the museums and gives them back to their cultures. As an ongoing series, I don't know, that one feels like it runs out of steam fairly quickly, but as an initial hook, like for a one-shot, there's an idea there. If you have somebody who's like breaking into like a heavily guarded museum and is going to take this stuff and kind of smuggle it back, and you can even do a little plot twist where the village or whatever that you take the artifact back to turns around and immediately sells it to some kind of private collector somewhere so they can all afford iPhones for their village. I mean, like, you could do some funny, subversive stuff with that pitch. But if once you say, hey, we specifically wanted to look at this from a marginalized creator's perspective, and then Vita's going to write it, and we really want to talk about the creator's experiences with the stuff, like, you start to lose people. You take what's a fairly novel pitch, and it feels like you're putting all of your weight behind the thing that is maybe least important to getting it sold. Or at least it's like, hey, 2014 called it, once its gimmick back is kind of how it winds up feeling. But with all these things, why is it that we have so many people who are just so wired, so pre-built to want to go in and make their, to argue with it, to make their point of like, oh, you're talking about this topic? Well, then definitely I'm going to call you a racist. Doesn't matter what you said. We're going to go there because that's all I know how to do. And I think if I think about the threats to the fandom, if I think about threats to comics, certainly you have, people, creators who don't really care, costs are too expensive. Not all the creators don't care, by the way, but you think about all the things that people complain about on a regular basis for comics, and it seems like one of the biggest threats that exist is that for a lot of people, it's more enjoyable, it's more fun to argue about these details than anything going out in the comic. For a lot of the people, and this was, I think, sad to me, is the people who showed up in the Acolyte video. Nobody was my point was it's too convoluted and too crazy. Never mentioned that the two girls were black. Never mentioned that it was the LGBTQ coven of witches that were the previous Jedi or whatever. Never mentioned that in the video. But people still came in and said, oh, you're complaining about race. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't say, here's what I love about the show. Why is it that we're predestined, pre-wired to want to fight about stuff, but never about the quality or content of the show, its merits. It's always the surface level traits. This thing is too woke. Okay, but what was the plot point that was too woke? Well, it's just too woke. This thing is not woke enough. What about the actual comic itself? Was it good? I don't know. We're not reading that. I asked one guy who said, I would buy all these comics. I said, okay, you would buy them, but will you buy them? Those are two different statements. It's easy to say, yeah, I would buy all these comics. I want to support, marginalized creators and everything else. Great. I'm glad you would, but will you? Did you go and actually put in an order? Did you pre-reserve stuff at a store? Did you, put some money in? I mean, this is a new initiative. putting money up front would help. But it just strikes me there's more excitement and attention about arguing about this stuff than actually, reading what we like. Crazy topic, I know. Anyway, thanks for listening.